The HOA threatened me $500 a day, but their boundary was 312 feet away. 6 weeks earlier, Monica started sending me violation notices over a smokehouse my family had used long before Cedar Ridge existed. First came inspection demands, then $500 a day threats, then an order to shut it down. I took the letters to my attorney, Rachel Morgan. She opened the county plat and found one number Monica couldn't talk around: 312 feet. Subscribe if you enjoy land rights stories where the documents matter, because Monica signed for the proof and kept coming anyway. At 5:36 that Saturday morning, I heard steel scraping against steel behind my cattle barn. It wasn't a sound that belonged on Dawson Creek Ranch. I set down the bag of hickory chunks I was carrying and walked around the corner. My smokehouse sat about 40 yards away, its old cedar walls dark against the gray morning. 3 women were standing at the door. Monica Whitfield had a 36-inch pry bar wedged under the lock. Janet Collins stood beside her, holding a flashlight and a phone. Susan Parker was several feet back, looking toward my house like she was already thinking about leaving. All 3 were inside my fence. "Morning, Monica." The pry bar stopped moving. Monica turned around slowly. For maybe half a second, surprise crossed her face. Then that familiar confidence returned. "Caleb, good. You're awake." I looked at the pry bar. Hard not to be. Janet lowered her phone slightly. Susan said nothing. Monica straightened her jacket and spoke like we were meeting at a county office instead of behind my barn before sunrise. "Cedar Ridge has authorized an emergency safety inspection of this structure." I looked past her toward Cedar Ridge Estates. The subdivision sat beyond my western pasture. 94 expensive homes behind a stone entrance and landscaping that probably cost more to maintain than my first pickup. Then I looked back at Monica. "You have a warrant?" Her jaw tightened. "This isn't a criminal matter." "County inspection order?" "The board has authority to investigate conditions affecting community health and property values." That wasn't what I'd asked. I stepped closer. "Do you have a county order?" "No." "Fire marshal?" "No." "Then get off my ranch." Susan looked relieved. Janet looked at Monica. Monica didn't move. For 6 weeks, that woman had sent letters, complaints, threats, and people with cameras toward my property. I'd answered all of it with documents: deeds, county maps, permits, inspection reports. She knew exactly where Cedar Ridge's authority ended. Apparently, she had decided a pry bar could move the line. "You've refused every reasonable request we've made," Monica said. "We have 94 homeowners to protect. My smokehouse isn't in your HOA. Your activities affect our community." "That's not ownership." Her face hardened. "We're going to document what's inside." I looked at Susan. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Then I looked at Janet. "You're recording this?" Janet raised her chin. "For the board." "Good." That answer seemed to confuse her. Monica turned back toward the lock. I could have grabbed the pry bar. 30 years as a county fire captain had taught me how quickly a bad situation gets worse when 2 angry people start fighting over a piece of steel, so I didn't touch her. I didn't threaten her. I watched. Monica pushed down. The old hasp groaned. She shifted her weight and tried again. Crack! 2 screws tore through the cedar frame. The hasp twisted loose and dropped into the dirt with the padlock still attached. For a moment, nobody moved. The broken hardware lay between us. Evidence has a way of making a cleaner sound than an argument. Monica pulled open the door. "Let's get this done." She stepped inside. Janet followed, still recording. Susan hesitated. "You don't have to go in there," I told her. Monica turned from inside the smokehouse. "Susan." Just her name. But there was enough pressure in it to tell me this wasn't the first time Monica had used that tone. Susan swallowed and stepped through the doorway. I waited until all 3 were inside. Then I walked forward. Monica was already talking about fire hazards. Janet was filming my racks, thermometers, seasoning shelves, extinguishers, and the stainless preparation table, as if she expected to uncover a chemical laboratory behind the brisket hooks. I put one hand on the heavy steel-backed door. Monica looked over. "What are you doing?" I closed it. Slam. The sound rolled across the yard. I dropped the exterior safety bar into its brackets. Click. For 2 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then Monica exploded. "Caleb!" The door shook. "You open this door right now!" I stepped back. Another Udar hit the steel from inside. "This is unlawful detention. Do you hear me? My husband is an attorney." I looked down at the broken hasp in the dirt. "I hear you. You are going to jail for this. I'm calling the sheriff." That stopped her for maybe 3 seconds. Then she started yelling even louder. I walked back toward the house. The sky was getting lighter over the pasture. A few cattle had gathered near the fence, watching me with the mild curiosity cattle reserve for human beings doing something foolish. My coffee was still warm. I carried the mug onto the porch, sat in the old wooden chair beside the railing, and called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher answered. "Sheriff's office, what's your emergency?" "My name is Caleb Dawson. I'm at Dawson Creek Ranch." "What's happening, Mr. Dawson?" "3 people just broke into a building on my ranch. I've got them contained." There was a short pause. "Contained how?" A muffled bang came from behind the barn. I took a sip of coffee. "They're inside the building they broke into." Another pause. "Are there any weapons involved?" "One of them used a pry bar to break the lock. I haven't touched anybody." "Is anyone injured?" "No." "Are they able to breathe safely?" "It's an old smokehouse, not a bank vault. Plenty of ventilation." She told me a deputy was on the way and instructed me not to escalate the situation. "Wasn't planning to." I hung up. Monica's voice carried across the yard. "When the sheriff gets here, you're finished, Dawson." I didn't answer. That was the part Monica never understood about me. Silence wasn't surrender. I'd spent most of my adult life walking into situations where everybody else was running out. Burning houses, vehicle wrecks, grass fires jumping county roads, men screaming because someone they loved was still inside. Panic had never improved any of them. Facts did. So I sat there. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Janet stopped shouting entirely. Susan never really started. Monica kept going. She promised lawsuits. Criminal charges, civil damages. She said Cedar Ridge would make sure I regretted humiliating its board. Then she said something that almost made me laugh. "We were conducting an authorized inspection." I looked toward the broken lock lying in the dirt. That was going to be an interesting sentence to explain. A little after 20 minutes, I heard an engine beyond the gate. Headlights moved between the live oaks. A sheriff's cruiser turned onto my gravel drive, raising a thin trail of dust behind it. The pounding inside the smokehouse stopped. Monica had heard it too. Her voice changed immediately. Finally, I stood and set my coffee on the porch rail. The cruiser rolled to a stop near the barn. The driver's door opened. Deputy Daniel Brooks stepped out. Monica started shouting from behind the locked door. "Officer, I'm being held against my will!" Daniel looked toward the smokehouse, then toward me, then at the pry bar lying beside the broken hasp. He didn't reach for his cuffs. He didn't make assumptions. He simply rested one hand on his belt and asked me the first question. "Caleb, what happened here?" And right then, standing between a locked smokehouse and a sheriff's cruiser in the middle of my own ranch, I knew the next few minutes could change everything. Because Monica believed Daniel had come to rescue her. Maybe he had. The question was what he would see once that door opened. But to understand why 3 HOA board members were locked inside my smokehouse before sunrise, you have to understand what Monica Whitfield had been trying to take from me for 6 weeks. Before Cedar Ridge started sending letters, my Saturdays were simple. Dawson Creek Ranch covered 186 acres of West Texas pasture, live oak, and shallow creek bottom. My family had held the land for decades, long before anybody carved 94 houses out of the property west of us and put a stone sign at the entrance calling it Cedar Ridge Estates. The Smokehouse was older than Cedar Ridge by a generation. My father rebuilt it in 1989 on the foundation my grandfather had used. 15 years ago, I upgraded the firebox, ventilation, and preparation area. I pulled the county permit, passed inspection, and kept every piece of paperwork afterward. Being a retired fire captain makes you particular about two things: fire safety and documentation. The place mattered for another reason. My wife used to spend Saturday afternoons there with me before I lost her. She'd sit outside with a glass of iced tea and tell me I was checking the brisket too often. After she died, keeping that Saturday routine became one of the ways I learned to live in a quiet house. Then Monica's first letter arrived. It came on Cedar Ridge letterhead and identified my smokehouse as an architecturally incompatible accessory structure visible from community property. I read that sentence twice. Then I looked through my kitchen window at a building that had been standing there before Cedar Ridge existed. I filed the letter away. 2 weeks later, another came. This one demanded an HOA inspection for fire, sanitation, and architectural compliance. I called the number at the bottom. Monica answered. "Your board doesn't have jurisdiction over my ranch. Your smoke affects Cedar Ridge residents. That's different from owning my land." "We have a community standards, Mr. Dawson." "So do I. One of mine is not letting strangers inspect my buildings." The conversation ended there, or I thought it did. The third notice threatened fines of $500 per day if I refused access. The fourth ordered me to stop using the smokehouse entirely until Cedar Ridge could determine whether it complied with HOA architectural standards. That one finally got my full attention. I wasn't worried about paying their fines. They had no lawful basis to collect them. I was worried about the kind of person who kept increasing a threat after being told she had no authority to make it. So I called Rachel Morgan. Rachel had handled property disputes around the county for years. She didn't care whether somebody arrived in work boots or a three-piece suit. She cared what was recorded. I brought the notices to her office. She read all four without saying much. Then she looked at me. "Are you a Cedar Ridge member?" "No." "Ever sign restrictive covenants?" "No." "Did your family sell them an easement?" "Not that I've ever seen." She leaned back. "Then let's stop guessing." We spent the next several days pulling the recorded documents. My deed, the subdivision declaration, county plats, development filings, my smokehouse permit, fire inspection records. The answer wasn't complicated. It was almost embarrassing. Rachel spread the county plat across her conference table and placed her finger on Cedar Ridge's western boundary. Then she placed another finger on the smokehouse. 312 feet. I looked at her. From what? The closest point where their recorded jurisdiction ends to your smokehouse. 312 feet, not 3 feet, not a disputed fence post. 312 feet of land separated Monica's authority from the building she was threatening to inspect. Rachel checked the subdivision declaration again. Dawson Creek Ranch wasn't listed. No annexation, no covenant. No easement giving Cedar Ridge enforcement rights. Nothing. Then she examined my county permit. Your smokehouse upgrade was permitted 15 years ago. Cedar Ridge didn't even exist. I smiled. Think she'll enjoy hearing that? Rachel didn't smile back. People who care about rules usually do. She paused. People who care about control usually don't. That distinction stayed with me. Rachel prepared a certified cease and desist. It wasn't emotional. That was the point. The letter identified Dawson Creek Ranch by legal description, attached the county plat, cited the subdivision boundary, included my smokehouse permit, and demanded that Cedar Ridge stop issuing enforcement notices against property outside its jurisdiction. Rachel also attached confirmation from the county that there was no outstanding fire or building violation against the smokehouse. The last paragraph was simple. Any future attempt to enter, inspect, fine, alter, or interfere with Dawson Creek Ranch without lawful authority would be documented and addressed accordingly. We sent it certified. 3 days later, Rachel called. She got it. How do you know? Because she signed for it herself. Rachel emailed me the delivery receipt. There it was. Monica Whitfield, her signature, date and time underneath. I printed it and put it in a binder with everything else. That signature would matter more than either of us understood at the time. Because from that moment forward, Monica couldn't claim confusion. She couldn't say she thought my ranch belonged to Cedar Ridge. She couldn't say nobody had shown her the boundary. She had the deed. She had the plat. She had the permit. She had a lawyer's written warning. And she had personally signed a receipt proving she'd received all of it. For 2 days, nothing happened. No letters, no SUV near my fence, no calls. I started thinking Rachel had been right, and the paperwork had finally ended it. On the third afternoon, I was repairing a gate when Thomas Reed pulled his pickup alongside the fence. Thomas had ranched down the road longer than Cedar Ridge had existed. "You make some new friends?" he asked. "What kind?" "White SUV, Cedar Ridge logo." I stopped working. Thomas nodded toward my western pasture. "Been sitting down there 20 minutes. Woman inside taking pictures." I looked toward the ridge. A white SUV was parked just beyond my fence. As I watched, the driver's window lowered. A long camera lens appeared. It pointed directly at my smokehouse. Then the SUV pulled away. That evening, another notice didn't arrive. Something worse did. A county vehicle came through my gate. The inspector stepped out holding a clipboard. "Caleb Dawson?" "That's me. We received a complaint concerning an unpermitted commercial meat processing operation and possible fire hazard on this property." I stared at him. "Commercial meat processing?" "That's what the complaint says." "Who filed it?" He hesitated. "Anonymous." I looked toward Cedar Ridge. The white SUV was gone, but I already understood what had changed. Monica had finally accepted that Cedar Ridge couldn't legally order me around, so she had stopped using Cedar Ridge's authority. Now she was going to try borrowing somebody else's. From that day forward, Monica could never say she didn't know. But knowing she had no authority didn't make her stop. It made her change tactics. The first county inspector spent 40 minutes at my smokehouse. He checked the firebox, ventilation, extinguishers, fuel storage, electrical connections, and the distance between the structure and the nearest fence. Then he looked at the complaint again. "Where's the commercial operation?" "There isn't one." "You sell any of this meat?" "No. Saturday cooking. Friends, neighbors, sometimes the firehouse." He closed his clipboard. "Then I don't see a commercial processing facility." Before leaving, he handed me a copy of his report. No violations. I put it in the binder beside Monica's certified receipt. 4 days later, Environmental Health showed up. This complaint alleged improper wastewater disposal and unsanitary food processing. They inspected. Nothing. Another clean report went into the binder. The following week brought animal control after somebody reported rodents and uncontrolled food waste around the smokehouse. The officer walked the property with me, found sealed trash containers, no infestation, and 2 barn cats sleeping under my pickup. "Somebody really doesn't like your barbecue," he said. Apparently. 3 complaints, 3 inspections, 3 clean reports. None of the complaints identified Monica. They didn't need to. Each one repeated language she'd already used in Cedar Ridge notices. Community health, fire exposure, sanitation risk, incompatible activity. Rachel noticed it too. "Don't accuse her yet," she told me over the phone. "You think it's her?" "I think suspicion isn't evidence. Keep every report." That was how Rachel worked. She didn't care what we believed. She cared what we could prove. I understood that. 30 years in the fire service had taught me the same lesson in another form. You didn't walk into a burned building and decide what caused the fire because something looked obvious. You preserved the scene. You documented what survived. You followed the evidence. So that's what I did. Still, there was something about those inspections that got under my skin. Cedar Ridge sat behind stone columns and trimmed lawns. Dawson Creek Ranch had weathered fencing, cattle guards, an old barn, and a pickup with enough scratches to tell its own history. Monica spoke to me like those differences meant something. Like clean stucco gave her more claim to West Texas than 4 generations of dirt under my family's boots. I'd spent a career being underestimated by people who saw a rancher before they saw a fire captain. I'd learned not to correct them too quickly. Sometimes being underestimated is useful. Then Thomas Reed noticed the SUV again. He called around dusk. "Your friend is back." I walked toward the western pasture. The white Cedar Ridge SUV was parked on the subdivision side of the fence. A woman stood beside it with a camera fitted with a long lens. She photographed the smokehouse, then the barn, then my driveway. When she noticed me watching, she got back inside and drove away. That night, I checked the trail camera mounted near the creek. It had caught the same SUV 3 times that week. Tuesday, 7:14 a.m., Thursday, 6:42 p.m., Friday, 5:51 a.m. I saved every clip. The next morning, I added another camera. I didn't put it toward Cedar Ridge homes. I aimed it entirely at my own fence and property. If somebody crossed that line, I wanted the line itself in the frame. 2 days later, Thomas came through my gate in his faded pickup. He didn't bother getting out. "You expecting surveyors?" "No." "Then you'd better come look." We drove down toward the creek. 20 yards past the cattle fence, I saw the first orange stake, then another, then 5 more, fresh, bright, driven into my soil. I got out and crouched beside one. No county markings. No utility company name. Just fluorescent tape and handwritten numbers. Thomas stared toward Cedar Ridge. "Those weren't here yesterday." "No." "Want me to pull them?" "Don't touch them." He looked at me. I took out my phone and photographed every stake before walking the line. That's when something stopped making sense. If Monica's fight was really about smoke drifting toward Cedar Ridge, the stakes should have been clustered around the smokehouse or along the nearest property line. They weren't. They ran southwest, past the smokehouse, toward the shallow creek. Then they turned and continued toward a section of open ground behind Cedar Ridge that hadn't been developed yet. I followed them until the line disappeared near a stand of live oaks. Thomas caught up. "What do you think?" "I think these aren't about barbecue." That afternoon, I sent the photographs to Rachel. She called within 10 minutes. "Don't move anything." "Wasn't planning to." "Do you know who placed them?" "No." "Then we find out." The next morning, another vehicle appeared. Not a county truck, a survey truck. It slowed near my western fence, stopped for less than a minute, then continued toward Cedar Ridge's undeveloped section. I wrote down the company name. Rachel called them. Their office wouldn't discuss a client's project, but one employee confirmed they had active work associated with future development near Cedar Ridge Estates. Future development. That phrase changed the shape of the whole problem. I pulled out the HOA letters again. Architectural incompatibility, community health, fire risk, sanitation. None of them mentioned development. None mentioned new houses. And none explained why somebody was putting survey stakes on my side of a boundary Monica had already been warned not to cross. Rachel recommended one person. Michael Turner, 63 years old, licensed surveyor, 4 decades of experience with ranch boundaries, subdivision plats, and the kind of old Texas property descriptions that could turn a fence dispute into 6 months of legal work. When I called him, he listened without interrupting. Then he asked me one question. "Do you still have the original county plat?" "Certified copy." "Good. Don't send me a picture. Bring the paper. The following morning, Michael stood beside my western fence with the plat spread across the hood of his truck. He studied the recorded lines, then the orange stakes, then Cedar Ridge. His expression changed. Caleb. What? Whoever put those stakes here wasn't measuring your smokehouse. I looked toward the line disappearing beside the creek. What were they measuring? Michael folded the plat once and pointed toward the empty acreage behind Cedar Ridge. A route. That was the moment the anonymous complaints stopped looking like harassment and started looking like cover. If Monica couldn't legally control my smokehouse, why was somebody suddenly surveying the land behind it? Michael Turner came back 2 mornings later with equipment, certified plats, and enough old survey records to settle the first question permanently. We started at the Northwest Monument and worked south. He checked every corner against the recorded description. The old fence wandered a few inches in places, the way ranch fences do after decades of repairs, but the legal boundary didn't. By noon, Michael planted his tripod near the creek and looked at his measurements. Your deed is clean. And Cedar Ridge? Exactly where the county plat says it is. He pointed toward my smokehouse. They don't own that. They don't control it. They don't have an easement across it. And unless somebody has a document you haven't shown me, they don't have a legitimate reason to be staking this side of your line. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it made the orange stakes more troubling. Michael photographed them and recorded their coordinates before we followed the route toward the creek. The stakes crossed a section of my pasture, then angled toward the undeveloped acreage behind Cedar Ridge. He stopped beside one and checked his field notes. This wasn't random. What does it look like? Preliminary planning, sight lines, access, maybe utility routing. For what? He looked toward Cedar Ridge. That's what I'd want to know. Rachel found the answer. 2 days later, she called me into her office and slid a development packet across the desk. The name on the cover was Gregory Sutton. I'd heard of him. Sutton had developed Cedar Ridge's original phase and had been pushing for additional construction along the western edge. Rachel opened the packet. Cedar Ridge Phase 2. The plan showed another group of homes extending toward my ranch. Not cheap ones, large lots. Private drives, expanded landscaping, a proposed walking trail. Then Rachel tapped a row of parcels directly facing my western pasture. The label read, Premium Ranch View Lots. I stared at it. Ranch View. Apparently your ranch is attractive when they're selling houses. She turned another page. And inconvenient when they're selling the view. A planning note appeared beside the western lots. Visual obstruction mitigation pending. The marked area lined up almost perfectly with my smokehouse, barn approach, and the stand of trees around them. For 6 weeks, Monica had talked about fire hazards, sanitation, smoke, community safety. Not once had she mentioned premium lots. I looked at Rachel. She wants the smokehouse gone for this? I can't prove what Monica personally wants yet. She tapped Gregory's plan. But I can tell you somebody planning Phase 2 considers your side of the fence part of the sales problem. Michael joined us that afternoon. He compared Gregory's preliminary map with the coordinates he'd taken from the orange stakes. The match wasn't exact. It didn't need to be. The direction was unmistakable. The stakes followed the same general corridor toward the future western lots. Michael drew a pencil line across a copy of the plat. Whoever was out there was looking beyond the current subdivision. Rachel leaned over the map. So the smokehouse notices start, then anonymous complaints, then surveillance, then survey activity tied to future development. Could still be separate, Michael said. Rachel nodded. Which is why we don't accuse anyone until we have the connection. That was the frustrating part. I knew what it looked like. Knowing and proving are different things. That evening, I drove past Cedar Ridge's entrance on my way home from town. A new sign had appeared near the sales office. Cedar Ridge, Phase 2 coming soon. Below it was an artist's rendering. Large homes, open sky, Western views, not a smokehouse anywhere in sight. Gregory Sutton was standing near the sign talking to Monica. I kept driving. The next morning, Monica came to my gate. She stayed outside this time. I walked down to meet her, but didn't open it. She held a folder against her side. "We need to resolve this, Caleb. Rachel gave you the resolution. Your attorney is treating this like a boundary dispute. It is a boundary dispute because you keep pretending mine doesn't exist." Her expression tightened. "This is bigger than one line on a map. Cedar Ridge is growing." There it was. Not safety, growth. "What does your growth have to do with my smokehouse?" She glanced toward the building. "Properties affect neighboring properties. You know that. Not the same as controlling them. We're trying to protect values for 94 families. And I'm protecting property my family actually owns." Monica lowered her voice. "Old structures disappear all the time, Caleb. Communities change." I studied her. "Then change yours." For a second, the polished HOA president expression disappeared. "What exactly do you want?" "Nothing." That answer bothered her more than a demand for money would have. I continued. "I don't want Cedar Ridge dues. I don't want a landscaping agreement. I don't want anything from Gregory Sutton. I want you to stay on your side of the fence." Her eyes sharpened at Gregory's name. Small reaction, but I saw it. Gregory has nothing to do with this." I didn't say he did. Silence. Monica realized too late that she'd answered a question I hadn't asked. She turned toward her SUV. Before getting in, she looked back. "This doesn't have to become ugly. It already became ugly when somebody put stakes on my ranch." She drove away without responding. I called Rachel before I reached the house. "Monica just came by." "What did she want?" "She said Cedar Ridge is growing." Rachel went quiet. Then I told her about Monica's reaction to Gregory's name. "Still not proof," she said. "I know. But it's useful." That afternoon, Rachel sent a formal records request concerning Cedar Ridge communications related to Phase 2, Gregory Sutton, Western Boundary Improvements, and Dawson Creek Ranch. She also warned me not to confront Monica again. "Why?" "Because we've already given her the deed. We've given her the plat. We've given her the permit. She signed for all of it. So? So if she crosses that fence now, she can't reasonably call it a misunderstanding." I looked toward the smokehouse. The old building stood exactly where it always had. Nothing about it had changed. Only the value somebody else had placed on the view behind it. That was when I finally understood the fight. The smoke was never the problem. My refusal was. Monica wanted Cedar Ridge's expansion to determine what happened on Dawson Creek Ranch. And the recorded boundary was the one thing she couldn't rewrite with a board vote. Rachel's voice turned colder before we hung up. "Don't give her a confrontation, Caleb. Give her room to make her own decisions." "Why?" "Because once somebody has been formally told she has no authority, every illegal step she takes afterward becomes harder to explain away as a mistake." Rachel's advice changed the way I handled everything after that. I stopped thinking about how to make Monica leave me alone. I started thinking about how to prove what she did if she refused. The binder on my kitchen table got thicker. Every HOA notice went in by date. Every county inspection report followed it. I added Michael Turner's survey, photographs of the orange stakes, Gregory Sutton's Phase 2 plan, and Monica's signed receipt for Rachel's cease and desist. Then I made a log. Date, time, vehicle, location, activity. 30 years in the fire service had taught me that memory becomes unreliable the moment pressure enters a room. A written timeline doesn't. I repositioned 2 trail cameras so they covered my western fence and the approach to the smokehouse without pointing into anyone's home. A third watched the cattle gate. Then I waited. Monica gave me plenty to record. Her white SUV appeared 3 times in 5 days, Once she stopped near the western fence at 6:18 in the morning. Another time Janet Collins was with her. They never crossed onto my property. They didn't have to. The cameras recorded them slowing down, photographing the smokehouse, and studying the gate. Meanwhile, Gregory's Phase 2 marketing continued. Survey crews worked the undeveloped ground behind Cedar Ridge. New promotional signs appeared. The words Premium Ranch View Lots started showing up in sales material Rachel obtained through public development filings. The cleaner the future looked on Gregory's drawings, the more inconvenient my ranch seemed to become. Then, on Thursday evening, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. Caleb Dawson? Speaking. A woman hesitated. It's Susan Parker. I sat down. Susan was Cedar Ridge's treasurer. She'd been with Monica at board meetings, but unlike Janet, she had never sent me a letter or confronted me at the fence. What can I do for you? I need to talk to you. About what? Another pause. Not over the phone. We met 40 minutes later at a roadside diner outside town. Susan was already in a booth when I arrived. No HOA SUV, no board folder on the table. Just coffee she hadn't touched and a large brown envelope beside her. I sat across from her. You wanted to talk. She looked toward the front windows. Monica doesn't know I'm here. That told me more than anything else she could have said. Susan opened the envelope and removed several pages. She called a private board session Tuesday night. About my ranch? About what she calls the Western nuisance issue. I almost laughed. That's a creative name. Susan didn't. She wants an emergency nuisance abatement inspection. On Dawson Creek Ranch? Yes. Rachel already sent her the boundary records. I know. Then what exactly is she planning to inspect? The smokehouse. There it was. Not a complaint to the county. Not another letter. Entry. I kept my voice level. Who authorized that? Monica says the board can authorize it. That's not what I asked. Susan looked down. No county agency. No warrant? No. Fire marshal? She shook her head. Attorney? Susan hesitated longer this time. The HOA attorney told her we shouldn't enter property outside Cedar Ridge without permission. That mattered. Is that in writing? I don't know. She pushed one document across the table. It was an internal email from Monica to Susan and Janet. The subject line read, Western Boundary Documentation. I read the final paragraph twice. If Dawson won't give us access voluntarily, we'll document the condition ourselves. The board has an obligation to protect Cedar Ridge from external nuisance conditions that threaten community value. I looked up. Why are you giving me this? Susan wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Because this stopped being what I signed up for. She told me Monica had become increasingly obsessed with Phase 2. Gregory Sutton had attended several closed planning discussions. Monica believed the western expansion would increase Cedar Ridge's influence and property values. Every time someone questioned whether the HOA could interfere with my ranch, Monica gave the same answer. Somebody had to protect the community. Janet agrees with her? Janet agrees with whoever sounds most certain. And you? Susan looked embarrassed. I've voted with Monica more times than I should have. That was honest enough that I believed her. Then don't vote with her now. Susan's eyes lifted. It's already past voting. She reached back into the envelope and removed a printed agenda, Emergency Nuisance Abatement Inspection. Underneath were 3 names, Monica Whitfield, Janet Collins, Susan Parker. You agreed to go? I told her it was a bad idea. That's different from refusing. I know. There was fear in her voice now. Not fear of me, fear of Monica. Susan explained that Monica controlled committee assignments, access to board records, and much of the internal decision-making. When Susan objected, Monica reminded her how easily a treasurer could be blamed when residents became unhappy about finances. It wasn't a direct threat. It didn't need to be. I folded the agenda. Keep the original. You need it. I need a copy. You may need the original. That surprised her. I wasn't interested in taking her evidence away. I wanted it preserved. I photographed every page, emailed the copies to Rachel from the parking lot, and handed the papers back. Rachel called before I'd even started my truck. Did Susan say they're actually entering the property? That's the plan. Do not invite them in. I wasn't planning to. Don't threaten them either. Camera's working. All three. Good. Preserve everything. I drove home and checked each camera personally. Fresh batteries, correct timestamps, clear views. The Smokehouse camera showed the door, lock, and fence crossing in the same frame. I tested it twice. Then I walked into the Smokehouse. Clean racks, extinguishers, thermometers, county inspection sticker. Nothing hidden, nothing illegal. Exactly what every inspector had already found. For the first time in 6 weeks, I understood something Monica apparently didn't. I didn't need to stop her from making another mistake. I needed to make sure the truth survived it. The next evening, Susan called again. Her voice was quieter than before. She's going through with it. When? Silence. Susan. I heard her take a breath. Saturday. I looked through my kitchen window toward the Smokehouse. What time? Another pause. Before sunrise. Saturday morning, I was awake at 4:50. Not because I was nervous. 30 years in the fire service had trained my body to wake before alarms. I made coffee, checked the camera timestamps one last time, and walked behind the barn like it was any other Saturday. I didn't wait at the fence. I didn't confront anyone. If Susan's warning was wrong, nothing would happen. At 5:36, I heard steel scraping against steel. That sound brought the story back to where it began. I rounded the cattle barn and saw Monica, Janet, and Susan inside my fence. The camera later showed exactly how they'd arrived. Monica climbed first. Janet followed with her phone already recording. Susan came last and stood beside the fence for several seconds before crossing. Then Monica walked directly to the Smokehouse. No inspection notice, no county official, no warrant. Just a 36-inch pry bar. By the time I reached them, Monica had already wedged it beneath the hasp. Morning, Monica, she turned. Caleb, good, you're awake. I looked at Susan. She lowered her eyes. Monica immediately began talking about Cedar Ridge's emergency authority, community safety, and nuisance conditions. I asked the questions Rachel and I had already discussed. Warrant? No. County order? No. Permission from me? You've refused permission. Exactly. Janet kept filming. Monica's irritation showed. We're documenting a condition that affects Cedar Ridge. From inside my locked building. We have a responsibility to our homeowners. You have a responsibility to stay off land you don't own. I didn't touch the pry bar. I didn't stand between Monica and the door. I simply let the cameras watch. Monica pushed down. The hasp strained. Susan spoke quietly. Monica, maybe we should stop. Monica didn't even look at her. We've already discussed this. She pulled again. Crack. The screws tore free. The broken hasp dropped into the dirt. For the first time, Janet stopped recording. Only for a second. Then she raised the phone again. Monica opened the Smokehouse. Document everything. She stepped inside. Janet followed. Susan remained outside. I looked at her. You can still leave. Her face tightened. Then Monica called from inside. Susan. Susan closed her eyes for a moment and followed. That was the last decision any of them made before the situation changed. Inside, Monica started searching. She found stainless racks, seasoning containers, temperature logs, fire extinguishers, a maintained firebox, and the county inspection sticker. Everything the inspectors had already documented. Nothing supported the story she'd been telling. Janet filmed the extinguisher tag. That's current. Monica ignored her. She opened a cabinet. Improper storage. Susan looked inside. It's seasoning. That's not the point. I was standing in the doorway now. What is the point, Monica? She turned. The point is that Cedar Ridge has a right to investigate activities threatening community values. No, it doesn't. We'll let our attorney decide that. Your attorney already did. That landed. Susan looked at Monica. Janet stopped moving. I continued. And Rachel sent you the boundary plat. Monica's expression hardened. That doesn't eliminate our responsibility to protect residents. I looked down at the broken hasp. Then Cedar Ridge can explain that to the sheriff. Monica frowned. What? I took hold of the heavy door. Her confidence slipped for the first time. Caleb, I closed it. Slam. The exterior safety bar dropped into place. Click. Monica hit the door almost immediately. Open this! I stepped back. This is false imprisonment. I'm reporting a break-in. You can't lock us in here. I'm not going to argue with 3 people who just forced their way into my building. I walked toward the house. Behind me, Monica's threats followed across the yard. Lawsuits, arrest, financial ruin. She even shouted that her husband was an attorney. I didn't answer. I called the sheriff's office. 3 people just broke into a building on my ranch. I've got them contained. The dispatcher asked whether anyone was hurt. No. Whether there were weapons. 1 pry bar. It's outside. Whether I felt threatened. Not anymore. I was told to wait for a deputy and avoid further confrontation. That was exactly what I intended to do. So I sat on my porch with my coffee. The cameras kept recording. Monica kept shouting. Janet eventually went quiet. Susan never raised her voice. At one point, Monica yelled that the sheriff would arrest me the moment he arrived. Maybe she believed it. 20 minutes later, headlights appeared beyond the wooden gate. A sheriff's cruiser rolled onto the gravel. Dust lifted behind it. The pounding inside the smokehouse stopped. Deputy Daniel Brooks stepped out. I knew Daniel by reputation. Senior deputy, 54, calm. The kind of officer who listened before deciding which person in an argument had earned the loudest consequences. He looked at me. Then the smokehouse. Then the pry bar beside the broken hasp. Before either of us could speak, Monica screamed from inside. "Deputy, get us out! He's holding us against our will!" Daniel's eyes moved back to me. What happened? 3 people crossed my fence, broke that lock, and entered my smokehouse without permission. You locked them inside? Until law enforcement arrived. He studied me for a moment, then walked toward the door. Monica started shouting instructions at him through the steel. Daniel ignored them. He crouched first, looked at the damaged wood, looked at the hasp, looked at the pry bar. Then he stood. Any cameras? 3. That changed his expression slightly. Footage preserved? Yes, he nodded. Only then did he reach for the safety bar. Inside, Monica went silent. Daniel lifted it. The steel door opened. Monica came out first, red-faced and furious, pointing directly at me. Arrest him. Daniel didn't move. He imprisoned 3 HOA officers conducting an authorized safety inspection. Daniel looked at Janet, then Susan, then at the broken lock. Authorized by who? The Cedar Ridge Board. That's not what I asked. Monica hesitated. Daniel's voice stayed level. Let's start over. The yard went quiet. Monica thought the deputy had come to free her. In one sense, she was right. Daniel had opened the smokehouse door. What he hadn't done was accept her version of why she'd been inside it. Monica stepped into the yard and immediately pointed at me. He locked 3 women inside a building. I want him arrested. Daniel looked at her without changing expression. Ma'am, I'll get everybody's statement. This isn't complicated. Usually means I should ask more questions. That shut her down for a second. Daniel separated us by several yards. Janet stood near the barn clutching her phone. Susan stayed closer to the smokehouse, staring at the broken hasp. Daniel started with Monica. Who owns this property? Caleb Dawson. Is Dawson Creek Ranch part of Cedar Ridge Estates? Monica hesitated. The ranch directly affects our community. That wasn't my question. Her jaw tightened. No. Is Mr. Dawson a member of your HOA? No. Did he give you permission to enter? We were conducting an authorized inspection. Did he give you permission? No. Did you have a warrant? No. County inspection order? No. Daniel looked toward the damaged door. Then he asked the question that changed the entire morning. Who broke the lock? Silence. Monica glanced at Janet. Janet looked at Susan. Susan kept staring at the ground. Daniel waited. He didn't fill the silence for them. Finally, Susan spoke. Monica did. Monica turned so fast I thought she'd misunderstood. Excuse me? Susan raised her head. You used the pry bar. We all agreed to conduct the inspection. I didn't agree to break his lock. Janet stepped backward. Monica's face hardened. Don't start rewriting what happened because a deputy is standing here. Daniel lifted one hand. Nobody talks over anybody. Then he looked at Susan. Did you see Ms. Whitfield damage the lock? Yes. Did you see Mr. Dawson give her permission? No. Did he threaten you before you entered? No, Monica interrupted. He trapped us afterward. Daniel turned toward her. And we're going to address that. Right now I'm establishing how you got inside. Then he looked at me. You said you have cameras? I led him to the trail camera facing the smokehouse. I removed the memory card and loaded the footage on my laptop inside the kitchen. Daniel watched the recording once without speaking. Then again. 5:31 a.m. Monica climbed the fence. Janet followed. Susan came last. 5:34. Monica walked toward the smokehouse carrying the pry bar. 5:36. She forced the hasp until it broke. The footage showed me arriving after they were already inside the property. It showed me standing back while Monica forced the door. It showed all three women entering. Then it showed me closing the door after them. Daniel paused the video. Send me the original file. Don't edit it. I won't. I'll need the camera itself documented too. Whatever you need. We returned outside. Monica was waiting with her arms crossed. I assume you've now seen what he did. I saw the whole thing. Something in Daniel's tone made her expression change. She tried another angle. The board had reasonable cause to believe that structure posed a danger. Daniel looked at the smokehouse. Then why didn't you call the county? We did. That answer cost her. I saw it immediately. Daniel did too. You filed the complaints? Monica froze. I said Cedar Ridge raised concerns. Daniel wrote something in his notebook. Rachel had told me not to accuse Monica without evidence. Monica had just connected herself to at least some of the complaints on her own. I went inside and brought out the binder. Daniel started with Michael Turner's survey, then the county plat, then my smokehouse permit, then the clean inspection reports. Finally, I handed him Rachel's certified cease and desist. This was sent to Monica 9 days ago. Daniel read it. He turned to the attached plat, then to the delivery confirmation. His finger stopped on the signature. That's yours? Monica barely looked. Yes. So before this morning, you received written notice that Dawson Creek Ranch isn't under Cedar Ridge jurisdiction? Our position is more complicated than that. Did you receive it? Yes. Did it tell you not to enter this property without lawful authority? Monica didn't answer. Daniel held the letter slightly higher. It's right here. Susan looked away. Janet's phone was no longer recording. Daniel continued. You had notice. You had the boundary documents. You had prior county inspections. And this morning you crossed the fence with a pry bar and broke a locked door. We were protecting homeowners. Daniel's voice stayed calm. HOA authority doesn't turn private property into community property. Monica's cheeks reddened. This is an absurd overreaction. Daniel looked at the broken hasp. Ma'am, misunderstandings usually don't require pry bars. Nobody spoke. He photographed the damaged door, the lock, the tool, and the fence crossing. Then he took individual statements from Janet and Susan. Janet tried to stay vague. She said Monica had organized the inspection and told them the board had authority. When Daniel asked who bought the pry bar, Janet hesitated. I think Monica did. Monica heard her. You think? Janet didn't answer. Daniel stepped between them. Miss Whitfield, you're done participating in other people's statements. Then Susan asked him something. Deputy Brooks, can I speak to you privately? Monica turned. About what? Susan didn't look at her. Daniel pointed toward his cruiser. We'll talk over there. Monica took a step forward. Susan, anything involving Cedar Ridge is privileged board business. Daniel stopped walking. Not if she's giving me a witness statement. The yard became silent again. Susan carried her purse to the cruiser. Before following Daniel, she looked at me once. Not apologetic this time. Resolved. Daniel looked back at Monica. You were already told you had no authority here. Then he walked away with Susan. Monica stood beside the broken smokehouse lock, watching her own treasurer open the passenger door of a sheriff's cruiser. And for the first time since this started, Monica wasn't trying to control what happened next. She was afraid of what Susan was about to say. Susan sat inside Daniel's cruiser for almost 20 minutes. When she finally stepped out, she wasn't carrying only her purse. She had another brown envelope. It was thicker than the one she'd shown me at the diner. Daniel took it from her carefully. What is this? Copies of financial records, emails, invoices, meeting notes. Monica moved toward them. Susan, those are confidential association records. Daniel raised a hand. Stay where you are. They belong to Cedar Ridge. Susan looked directly at Monica. They belong to the homeowners who paid for them. That was the first time I'd heard Susan challenge her without hesitation. Daniel opened the envelope but didn't start sorting through it in the yard. Instead, he asked Susan what the records showed. She took a breath. Association money was used to investigate Caleb's property. Monica immediately objected. That's completely misleading. Daniel didn't look at her. Keep going. Susan explained that over the previous several months, Cedar Ridge had paid for survey consultations near my western boundary, legal research concerning nuisance enforcement outside the subdivision, and planning work connected to Phase 2. Some invoices were coded as Community Protection. Others were labeled Western Boundary Enhancement. I looked at Monica. 6 weeks of complaints suddenly had dollar amounts attached to them. Susan continued. Gregory Sutton attended meetings about Phase 2. He told Monica the western lots would be among the most valuable properties in the expansion if the views stayed open. That's normal development planning, Monica snapped. Susan ignored her. There were discussions about infrastructure contributions. Daniel stopped writing. What kind of contributions? Road improvements, landscaping, possibly upgrades to common areas. Gregory's company would contribute after Phase 2 approvals moved forward. Now the motive was becoming clearer. Cedar Ridge wasn't buying my land. Gregory wasn't claiming he owned my smokehouse. But Phase 2 promised money and higher property values. And Monica had started treating anything outside the subdivision that interfered with that plan as something she had the right to control. Including me. Daniel looked at Monica. Did Mr. Sutton tell you to enter this ranch? No. Her answer came quickly. Susan nodded. That's true. I noticed the distinction. Gregory hadn't ordered the break-in. Monica had made that decision herself. That mattered because it kept the story grounded in what the evidence actually showed. Susan reached into her purse and produced several folded pages. These are emails I printed last night. Daniel accepted them. One message discussed obtaining updated sightline information along the western boundary. Another referred to the smokehouse as a negative visual feature. Then came the sentence that made Rachel's earlier warning feel prophetic. Monica, county channels have failed to produce action. We may need direct documentation to establish the condition ourselves. Daniel read it twice. When was this sent? Susan gave him the date. 3 days after Monica signed for Rachel's cease and desist. Not before she knew. After. Daniel added the pages to his evidence folder. By late morning, he had taken everyone's statements and documented the damaged smokehouse. He told Monica, Janet, and Susan they were free to leave for the moment, but the incident would be forwarded for review with potential trespass and property damage allegations. Monica stared at me before walking away. This isn't over. Rachel arrived less than an hour later. I handed her copies of everything Susan had provided. She read the financial records at my kitchen table. Her expression grew colder page by page. Caleb, this just became bigger than your lock. How much bigger? If these records are complete, HOA funds were being spent on activities involving property the association doesn't control. While board leadership was threatening you with penalties it couldn't lawfully impose. She pulled out her laptop. What are you doing? Preservation notices. That afternoon, formal notices went to Cedar Ridge, Monica, Janet, Susan, and Gregory Sutton. Emails, invoices, board minutes, survey records, development communications. Nothing related to Dawson Creek Ranch or Phase 2 was to be destroyed, altered, or deleted. Rachel wasn't accusing anyone of a crime. She was making sure the paper trail survived. Word of the break-in spread faster than the legal notices. Thomas Reed had seen the sheriff's cruiser in my yard. Cedar Ridge residents had seen Monica return home furious. By Sunday evening, people inside the subdivision were comparing stories. A retired teacher showed Rachel 3 violation notices for a vegetable garden that had existed before the rule Monica cited. A young couple produced escalating fines over a basketball hoop. Another homeowner had been threatened over a trailer parked overnight during a move. Individually, each dispute looked small. Together, they showed a pattern. Monica had spent years discovering how far people could be pushed before they fought back. Most paid. Most removed whatever she disliked. Most decided peace was cheaper than resistance. I had done something different. I'd asked her to show me the authority. When she couldn't, I'd asked again. Then I'd kept the documents. Susan called me Sunday night. I owe you an apology. You already helped tell the truth. I should have done it sooner. Probably. She went quiet. I wasn't going to pretend she'd done nothing wrong, but I wasn't interested in punishing someone who had finally decided to tell the truth either. What happens now? She asked. Rachel handles the paper. Daniel handles the report. And Monica? Monica handles Monica. Monday morning, Rachel called. She'd received the first batch of internal HOA records in response to the growing pressure from board members and residents demanding answers. Her voice sounded different, focused. Caleb, remember the fines residents have been talking about? Yeah. I started checking the rules behind them. And, a pause. Some of these enforcement provisions don't appear in the properly adopted version of the governing documents. I sat forward. Meaning we may be looking at money collected under rules that were never approved the way Cedar Ridge claims they were. The smokehouse break-in had exposed Monica. Susan's records had exposed the motive. But Rachel had just found something that could turn 94 homeowners from spectators into participants. Monica's worst problem wasn't the broken smokehouse lock anymore. 3 nights later, Cedar Ridge's clubhouse was packed. People stood along the walls and spilled into the hallway. Some carried violation letters. Others had folders of payment receipts, board notices, and printed emails. I sat near the back beside Thomas Reed. This wasn't my HOA. I wasn't there to vote. I was there because Monica had dragged my ranch into Cedar Ridge's business. And now Cedar Ridge wanted to know how she'd done it. Monica sat at the board table with Janet on one side and Susan on the other. For once, neither woman looked like she belonged beside her. Rachel stood near a folding table covered with documents. She started with the simplest fact: a county plat. Dawson Creek Ranch is outside Cedar Ridge Estates. She pointed to the recorded boundary. Mr. Dawson's Smokehouse sits 312 feet beyond the closest point of HOA jurisdiction. Nobody argued. Next came my permit. Then the clean county inspection reports. Fire, environmental health, animal control, no violations. Rachel placed Monica's certified receipt beside them. 9 days before the incident, Ms. Whitfield personally received written notice confirming that Cedar Ridge had no authority to enter or inspect Dawson Creek Ranch. Monica leaned toward her microphone. "We've already heard this." Rachel looked at her. "The homeowners haven't." That changed the room. Then came the footage. The clubhouse went silent as the video showed Monica climbing my fence before sunrise. Janet followed. Susan came last. Monica approached the smokehouse with the pry bar. Someone near the front whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." Crack! Even through the recording, the sound of the hasp breaking was clear. Monica shifted in her chair. The footage continued until all 3 women entered the smokehouse. Rachel stopped it there. "No interpretation is necessary." Monica reached for the microphone. "This presentation deliberately removes the safety concerns that led to the inspection." A man in the second row stood. "What safety concerns?" The county cleared him. Applause broke out. The acting meeting moderator called for order. Rachel didn't raise her voice. She opened Gregory Sutton's Phase 2 plan. Premium Ranch View Lots. Then she displayed the planning note. Visual obstruction mitigation pending. Residents began murmuring, saw Rachel followed with Susan's financial records. Survey consultation, legal research, western boundary planning, consultant invoices, all paid with association funds. Monica interrupted. "Those expenditures were made to protect Cedar Ridge property values." Susan finally turned toward her. "That's not what residents were told." The room quieted again. Susan described the private meetings, Gregory's presentations, the infrastructure contributions expected if Phase 2 moved forward. Monica's frustration after county complaints failed. Then Susan read Monica's email aloud. "If Dawson won't give us access voluntarily, we'll document the condition ourselves." Monica shook her head. "That statement is being taken completely out of context." Janet stared down at the table. Rachel asked her one question. "Ms. Collins, who planned the inspection?" Janet looked at Monica, then at the crowd. "Monica!" Monica's chair moved sharply. "Janet?" Janet kept going. "She scheduled it. She told us what time to meet." Rachel waited. "And the pry bar?" Janet swallowed. "Monica bought it." A wave of angry voices moved through the clubhouse. Monica tried to speak over them. "I was acting on behalf of this community." A woman near the aisle stood holding a stack of violation notices. "No, you were acting like you owned it." That was when the meeting stopped being about me. Residents began bringing their own records forward. A retired teacher had paid fines over a garden rule. A young couple had been fined for a basketball hoop. Another family had paid hundreds over temporary trailer parking. Rachel laid the properly adopted Cedar Ridge rules beside the enforcement versions Monica's board had been using. Several provisions didn't match. Some had been altered through board policy without the approval required by Cedar Ridge's own governing documents. Others couldn't be traced to a valid membership vote at all. Susan confirmed the accounting records showed thousands of dollars collected under those provisions. One homeowner shouted from the back, "Are we getting that money back?" The moderator called for order again. Rachel answered carefully, "That will require a full audit and legal review. No promises, no exaggeration, just consequences." Monica tried one final argument. She stood behind the board table and looked directly at the residents. "You elected me to protect Cedar Ridge. Phase 2 would strengthen this community. Dawson's property affects every western lot, whether he wants to admit that or not." I stood for the first time. "My property affects your view." The room went quiet. "That doesn't make it yours." Monica stared at me. I continued. "You could have disagreed with me. You could have gone to the county. You did go to the county." I pointed toward the documents. "They told you no." Then towards the screen showing my fence. "So you climbed it." I sat down. Nothing else needed saying. A motion was made to remove Monica as president and from her board position under Cedar Ridge's governing procedures. The vote wasn't close. Susan voted yes. Janet voted yes. One by one, hands rose across the room. Monica watched the authority she'd spent years building disappear through the same process she'd once used against everybody else. Rules, records, votes. When the result was announced, she gathered her papers without speaking. No applause followed her out. That silence felt heavier. Outside, Daniel Brooks was waiting near his cruiser. He hadn't come for the HOA vote. He'd come to update me. "The report's complete," he said. "What happens now?" "It's been forwarded." "Where?" "County prosecutor." Through the clubhouse windows, I could see residents surrounding Susan and Rachel with documents in their hands. Monica had lost Cedar Ridge, but Cedar Ridge had never been the only authority involved. The vote removed her from the board. The sheriff's report had already gone somewhere HOA votes couldn't reach. The legal part moved slower than the HOA meeting. That didn't bother me. I'd spent 30 years watching people make bad decisions because they wanted immediate answers. Rachel reminded me that courts and prosecutors worked on evidence, not applause. Daniel's report included the camera footage, photographs of the broken hasp, the pry bar, witness statements, Michael Turner's boundary records, and Rachel's certified cease and desist bearing Monica's signature. Susan cooperated fully. Janet did too. Monica hired an attorney. A few months later, Rachel called me. The prosecutor reached a resolution. I set down the wrench I was using on a gate hinge. "What kind?" "Monica is accepting responsibility on the criminal trespass and property damage matter. Probation, fines, and restitution for the smokehouse damage." "No jail?" "No." I thought about that. Some people probably expected me to be disappointed. I wasn't. I hadn't wanted Monica in jail. I'd wanted her off my land. "Works for me." Rachel laughed softly. I thought it might. The restitution check eventually arrived. It covered the broken hasp, damaged cedar around the mounting screws, replacement hardware, and repair labor. I could have replaced everything myself. Instead, Rachel suggested I keep receipts and have the repair documented. So I did. The new lock went onto the same old smokehouse. Nothing dramatic, just stronger hardware where Monica's pry bar had left scars. Cedar Ridge had its own cleanup to handle. A reformed board ordered a full review of fines, enforcement procedures, and expenditures made under Monica's leadership. Residents who had paid penalties tied to improperly adopted rules were notified that their cases were being reviewed for refunds or credits. Susan stayed long enough to help the new board understand the financial records. Then she resigned as treasurer. When she told me, she looked relieved. "I think Cedar Ridge needs people who aren't carrying all this history." "Maybe," she smiled. "That's the nicest way you've ever told me I should have spoken up sooner." I wasn't trying to be nice. That made her laugh. Gregory Sutton's Phase 2 didn't disappear. That wasn't the point either. Developers had the right to develop land they actually controlled. What changed was the plan. The western layout was revised. The so-called visual obstruction issue vanished from the documents Rachel later reviewed. Whatever Gregory built would have to work around Dawson Creek Ranch instead of treating my property like an unfinished section of his project. Then Cedar Ridge sent me one final letter. This one was different. No violation number, no deadline, no threat. The new board formally acknowledged that Dawson Creek Ranch was outside Cedar Ridge Estates and that the HOA possessed no enforcement, inspection, architectural, or nuisance abatement authority over my property beyond whatever rights any ordinary neighbor could lawfully exercise. Rachel read it first. "Keep this forever." I put it in the binder, right behind Monica's signed receipt. For the first time in months, that binder stopped growing. Life got quiet again. That was worth more to me than winning an argument. By fall, the Saturday Smokehouse routine had returned. Thomas Reed started showing up around noon, usually pretending he'd stopped by for some reason unrelated to brisket. Daniel Brooks came once while off duty. He stood at the gate until I waved him through. "Didn't want any confusion about unauthorized entry," he said. Smart man. Susan came later carrying potato salad. A few Cedar Ridge families followed. Every one of them came through the wooden gate. Everyone had been invited. That detail mattered to me more than they probably understood. For months, Monica had treated my boundary as an obstacle. It wasn't. A boundary doesn't mean people can never cross. It means the owner gets to decide when they do. By late afternoon, folding chairs filled the yard. Kids ran between the live oaks. Thomas argued with Daniel about whether my brisket had gotten better, or whether he was simply getting hungrier with age. For a while I stood beside the smokehouse and listened. There had been Saturdays years earlier when my wife stood in almost the same spot. I still felt that absence. Some losses don't resolve themselves because a legal dispute ends, but the ranch no longer felt like something I had to defend every minute. It felt like home again. Daniel walked over while I checked the meat. "Ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't had those cameras?" "Sure. And?" "I would have had my word. Monica would have had hers." He nodded toward the smokehouse. "Documentation made that a short argument. That's why fire captains write reports." Later, one of the Cedar Ridge residents asked the question everybody else had apparently been too polite to ask. "Caleb, was it worth it?" "What?" "Locking Monica inside." Several conversations nearby stopped. I looked at the smokehouse, then toward Cedar Ridge beyond my western fence. I didn't want revenge. Nobody interrupted. I wanted the same thing from the beginning. Stay off my land unless you have a legal right to be here. I checked the brisket temperature. Perfect. Then I closed the smoker. They spent 6 weeks arguing about where my property line was. Thomas smiled because he knew what was coming. Took one broken lock and a deputy to finally help them find it. That got a laugh. But the truth underneath it wasn't funny. Monica hadn't lost because I was stronger. She hadn't lost because I shouted louder. She lost because every time she crossed a line, there was another document showing exactly where that line stood. A deed, a county plat, a permit, an inspection report, a certified letter, a camera recording. Then finally, her own emails and financial records. She'd tried to replace ownership with influence. Evidence put ownership back where it belonged. As evening settled over Dawson Creek Ranch, cattle moved slowly beyond the fence and the last plates were cleared from the tables. I opened the smokehouse one more time. Hickory smoke rolled into the yard and drifted west, toward Cedar Ridge, exactly as it had before Monica arrived. Nobody complained. Nobody photographed it. Nobody sent a violation notice. The wind carried that smoke straight across a property boundary everybody finally understood belonged to me. The funny thing was, the smoke never cared about that line, but people had finally learned to.
And maybe that's the lessons Caleb earned the hard way. When somebody's strategy was it rightfully yours, staying calm doesn't mean giving in. Caleb didn't win his peace by shouting louder. He kept the deed, the county flat, the inspection report, the certified letter, and the camera footage. When the two finally had to be shouted out, those records spoke more clearly than Angel ever could. There's something worth remembering in that, especially when you spend years building a home, working a piece of land, or simply trying to live quietly. Boundaries matter, but so does how we defend them. Caleb stood his ground without losing his dignity, and when it was over, he didn't ask for anybody to be destroyed. He asked for his property to be respected, and his Saturday afternoon to belong to him again. If you ever had to stand your ground with an HOA, a neighbor, or anyone who wouldn't take a respectful no for an answer, type yes in the comments, and if you got a story of your own, share it. A lot of folks reading those comments may recognize exactly what you went through, as if stories about rancher, landowner, property rights, and ordinary people quietly standing up for what's theirs are your kind of stories. Subscribe and stick around. We got more coming, and I'd love to help you here for the next one.